Good afternoon. I'm Denise Simmons with the HCI Solution. I would like to thank you for joining us today on our Report Designer education session. Today's session is on creating dynamic lists of data. As we go through the education section, please make sure not to put us on hold, as the on-hold music can cause disruption to others during the session. If you do drop off the call, you are more than welcome to dial back in. We are currently working on loading these sessions to the website, and you should be able to view them there by next week. Today's presenter is Dan Collins. He is our VP of Operations. Dan has been at the forefront of EHR development and customer care for over 21 years while working at Meditech in various roles. Dan has led data service teams that supported all of Meditech's platforms. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Dan to continue.
Thanks, Danae, and welcome everyone. Today we're going to go over another topic in Advanced Report Designer, another topic in Report Designer, creating dynamic lists of data. And this is a pretty interesting one. It's gonna what we're going to cover today will allow you to kind of manipulate, analyze some data in the report, and kind of output the data in different, more advanced ways than just listing off fields and records in a report. And we're going to do a live demonstration of, how you can use lists to manipulate that data and output it in different ways. So what we're going to cover today is creating and sorting a list, searching a list, traversing a list, and printing a list. So if some of you attended some of our previous educational sessions, this might be a little bit of a review for you, but just going to reuse a couple of slides that we've went over in our data structures educational session. But what is a list as far as in the Meditech system, especially in the MAT applications? List structures are used extensively, and they're basically just a group of data items, and each data item is called a member. And on this slide here, we show how a list is visually represented in MagicFS. And MagicFS is the language that the MAT 6X applications are based on. So lists are just groups of data elements, and a single data element, a member, can be a list itself. And you can see that here in the the first list item in the list here. There's another list that's one, the words 1, 2, and 3. And being able to parse these lists and create your own lists is a pretty powerful part of Report Designer that we're going to dive into today. If you need to retrieving data from one of these lists, there's several different ways to do it, but one of the methods of doing it is to use the offset operator, and that's what this table depicts here too. And if I wanted to get the value of the first member in the list, I would use the offset operator, and sometimes it's referred to as piece, like piece 0, offset 0, or piece 0 will return the first item in the list, which is a list itself called 1, 2, 3. And if you executed the code piece 0, piece 1, you would get the first list item, and then you would take that second list item in that list, which is the word 2. So, we always start at 0, and like a lot of things in computer science, you start counting at 0. So 0 is always the first item, and then 1 is always the second item. This table depicts the different functions that are available to you in Report Designer to help you process lists. And what I've laid out here is where and when you're creating a rule and report designer, what group of functions can these functions be found in? So most of these, all of these on this table are found under the expression group of functions. So you can create a list of items, you know, and it's usually used to create like a fixed size, a list where you know what all the list members are. And there's some in the last column here is some example code that's some example report designer code and using those functions. Insert a list just inserts an item at the beginning of the list. Join list inserts an item at the end of the list. You can use assign value. Assign value is really just to use to delete a list or clear out a list. Sometimes you might want to store a list in an external variable. And then you may need to clear out that list at the beginning of the rule to you maybe rebuild it, and then you would use the assignment value and you would say assign nil to that list value, that external variable to clear out the list and reset it. And like I already mentioned too, there's the offset operator that you can use in Report Designer to retrieve the value of certain elements in the list at a particular list position. And then this is the last set of functions that is available to you in Report Designer. Series count is a function that will count the number of items in the list. And that is crucial to being able to process the items in the list. You have to be able to know how large the list is in order to process it. So you can, you know, if you write a do loop or something to process the items in the list, you need to know when you've reached the end of the list. And you do that by, the only way you can do that is by knowing how large the list is. Locate, the locate function allows you to search a list for a particular item. And then there's series sort ascending and series sort descending, just allow you to sort the list in ascending or descending order. And then there's another interesting function called series eliminate empty entries. So if you have a list of items and there's some blank entries in there that maybe have a nil value, you can remove those blank entries from the list and just kind of compact them out. And so using the functions that we described, you're able to manipulate and process lists. So you can add items to a list using the create list, join, and insert functions. You can search for an item in a list using the series count and find functions. And you can traverse a list by using the offset operator in the series count functions. So we're going to do a live demonstration of adding a dynamic list to a report. And we're going to take a report that was already written, a billing report, in a 6.1 Meditech system that basically just prints off charges by service date. But we're going to do a hypothetical scenario here and assume that we've been asked to write a report that will list off those charges by service date, but then at the end of the report, we'll list off the 10 highest charges from the report. And this list should include patient identifiers and charge info, and it should the list should be sorted by the highest charge first down to the smallest charge. And we don't want to repeat specific charge procedures in this list. So basically a top 10 list of the highest charges that were printed on the report. And you know, this is an example of some pretty powerful stuff that you could do with Report Designer. That's, you know, some data analysis and some of the more complex data gathering that you can do, and data gathering and presenting that you can do with Report Designer. So in order to print the list of, you know, charges in the report, we're going to print 5 separate columns of data. So we're going to have 5 separate lists to output the data. And you could do it all in one list, but doing 5 separate lists for 5 separate columns gives you more flexibility and with your formatting and spacing and things like that. And the report output of the special report trailer section, should look something like this. Where we have 5 separate columns with the charge amount, and all of these rows will be sorted by that charge amount. So the highest charge first. And if any of you have any questions, feel free to speak up at any time or use the chat feature. So in order to do this, our report already goes through and lists off all the charge transactions for the given service date range. So in order to do what we've been asked to do, what we're first going to have to do is build this list where it's basically a list of lists, and we're going to have each list member is going to be one group of 5 different fields, and it's going to be that one list is going to be the charge amount, service date, charge procedure, account number, and account name. So those will all go together with one single charge. And then we're going to just every time the report in the detail section prints off a charge, we're going to add those fields to this list. And then we're going to, after the report has printed all the detail sections at the report trailer, we're going to write a rule that will sort this list. We'll sort it by the largest charge first down to the smallest. So we're going to sort this in descending order. And then we're going to pick out the 10 highest list elements here. And you'll see how we do that as we start writing the rule here. And we also have to make sure that we check for duplicates here. And so if we've already included a particular charge procedure, then we're not going to include that particular charge. And this is just a good example that'll be able to use all of the major functions in working with lists. We're going to show you how to create a list, join items to a list, how to sort a list, how to search a list, and how to print a list. All right, so we're going to dive right into the live demonstration portion of this. All right, and we're working in a Meditech test system here at Halifax Health. They're one of HCI's customers. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull up the report that we already have written, and we're going to add some code to this report to be able to set up those lists that I was just talking about. Charges with lists. Let me show you what this report looks like. We're just going to run it for the past year, just so you get an idea of what this report does now. This basically lists off a patient and all of their charges for that date range of the last year. And then at the end of the report, there's a report total. But what we're going to do is add a new section in this trailer region here at the bottom of the report to list off the top 10 charges. All right, so first of what we need we need to do is to build our list that's going to list off all the charges that are included in the report. So we're going to go to the region section of the report and go to the detail section and add an on-entry attribute, which just means that we're going to execute this particular new rule when we get to the detail section of the report. And the detail section of this report is bar charge transactions. So patient accounting, charge transactions. We're going to create a new rule called, let's see, we'll call it create charge list. Give it a little bit of a better name. All right, so we're going to set up some variables here. First, I'm going to set up that charge list, which is the list within the larger list that's going to include, and I like to, whenever I'm working with lists, I think it's always good to write some notes in here in the description to kind of describe what's meant to be inside this list, and I'm going to do that here. So the first member in the list, we want that to be charge amount. The second item is the charge service date, and then the charge procedure code, and then the account number and the name. And I'm just documenting this here. So later on, you know, if I ever need to go back and I'm troubleshooting this report, I can understand, okay, what's this variable supposed to contain? And then we're going to have the larger list that's going to be an external variable, which means that we're going to be able to access this variable, this list from outside of this rule, and we're going to be able to process it in the trailer section of the report later. So what this list is basically, like I said, a list of lists. It's a list of charge lists. So it's basically going to look like this. It's just going to be a bunch of these charge lists grouped together. So I'm just indicating here that, you know, within this larger e-charge list here is a bunch of these lists. So that'll make more sense to you, I think, as we go on here. Oh, and then I'm going to create another variable to store the service date, the external version of the service date, because when we're going to get the charge transaction service date, it's going to be in an internal form of the date, and we're going to use a function on that date to convert that to the, you know, a date that we're used to seeing, like with, you know, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 2-digit year, all separated by slashes. If we didn't do that, when we printed out the list that included the service date, it would look funny. It would look like, you know, you'd see a bunch of brackets, and you would see the internal format of the date, which is a list in itself. And, you know, you'd see the date in there, but it wouldn't be in the nice format that we'd like to see. All right, so we're going to need to get some fields from the transaction record and the billing account main records. Like we want to know like the charge amount, charge procedure, the patient name, patient account number. So I'm going to get all of those pieces of data from bar account. Let's see, let's pull some of our transaction information. Transaction amount we want. transaction procedure code. Here's service date. We want service date, and let's see, procedure code, charge code is what it is, the field that we want. Transaction charge code. So that's it for the transactions. And so we also want the account number, or number rather, and the patient's name. And when we come into this rule, the keys that we need for these records in these fields are already defined as V0 will be the internal billing account object identifier, and then that V1 variable will be the transaction number when we come into this rule from the detail section of the report. All right, so then we're just gonna now write a rule to build the list that we will process later on. So this list is just gonna be a list of all the charges that we're printing on the report. What we first wanna do is convert the service date for the charge transaction. So the way we do that is we use a string manipulation function, and then we go click on format, and the source is going to be what field or variable do we want to convert from, and that's going to be our bar account transaction service date field, which will be in the internal format that's computer readable, but not very human readable. And we're going to convert that. We're going to use a conversion function here. So we're going to say convert to date external. And we're going to save that as our date into our date external variable. And accept that. And now we're going to write a piece of code to just basically create a list for this one charge. And so we're going to create a new line, and we're going to go to expression, create a list. And we're going to click on create a list. And you can just continue to add fields to a list. It can be a mix of variables, or it can be a mix of numbers, free text. But we know, because we've defined on our first screen here what this list should contain. First, we want charge amount, service date, charge procedure, account number, and name. So we're going to build the list in that order. So transaction amount is the first item we want in the list, and then the second item is the date. So we're going to use the variable for that one because we converted that to an external date that we're going to print on the report. The next one is the charge procedure, charge code. The next one is the patient's account number. And then the last one is the patient's name. And we're going to save that as charge list. So we just created a list. And what we're going to do is we're going to add that list to the larger list of lists. So in this report, we're going to come into this rule each time we hit a new charge on a patient. So for each patient, we're going to come into this rule dozens of times, and we're going to be creating this list dozens of times. And each time we're going to add this list to a larger list. And that larger list is going to contain every charge that was printed on the report. So let's add to that list now. We're going to create a new line, and we're going to add this charge list to the larger list. So we're going to say expression join list, and we're going to choose join list, and we have to choose what we want to add to the list. And what we want to add to the list is the variable that we just created, charge list. So I'm going to select the variable charge list, and then we're going to join charge lists to the larger external variable charge list. I'm going to accept that. And that's it for this rule. Does anybody have any questions? You know, and we're jumping around a little bit in our educational sessions. One of our educational sessions, we're going to go over more details on creating rules. You know, but for this educational session, we're basically, you know, focusing on lists. All right, so let's save this one. File it as a file. So you can see that this is in the detail section in the report. And every time we hit a new charge, we're going to be adding to this list. So what I want to do now is add a new rule to the trailer section of this report. So after we've built that huge list of all the charges in the report, we want to write a rule that's going to go through that list of charges, sort it, and pick off the 10 highest charges. So let's do that. We're going to add a new attribute saying on entry, we're going to create a new rule, and let's just call it maybe charge print. You know, I always feel like they don't give you enough characters for these rule mnemonics. You know, I like to be more descriptive, but I think there's only 10 characters here you can use. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the other rule that we just created into this one, just because I can, some of the variables and things I want to reuse. So I'm going to copy the rule that we just created. So right here, create charge list. And this one is going to be print charge list. All right, it's really a top 10 list. We're not going to use date external anymore. I'm going to delete this code here because we're going to add new code and we don't need these fields here. We're going to delete these. I'm going to remove that, but all the rest of this, these variables we still need. All right, we're going to create some new variables for this rule. We're going to create account for the patient's account number, amount for charge amount. Let's see, we're going to do, we need a counter, and that counter is going to be used just to count to 10 to make sure that we only are including the top 10 charges. I'm going to have date. And then we're going to create some external variables that are going to be used for our 5 columns on our report, where each of those columns is going to be a separate list. So we're going to have one external variable for account num call. And I have to make it an external variable so that it can be used outside of this rule, and we can attach these external variables to the report itself. And I'll show you that after. So we're going to create one for the account number list. We're going to create one for the charge amount. We're going to create one for patient name. I'm going to create one for the procedure code. And that one I have a capital I instead of a lowercase I. That's okay. And then I'm going to create one for the procedure service date. And then there are some additional local variables that we're going to use to help us process the lists here. One of them is list POS for list position, meaning the position of where we are on the list, list size. Oh yeah, did I do a name for patient's name? Yeah, I didn't do that yet. I need a variable for the patient's name and a variable for the procedure code. All right, I think that should do it. And we're ready to start writing the rule. What we first need to do is we have this huge list now that's not sorted. You know, the list just has charges in it based on in what order the charges were added to the report, and it's not in any particular order. What we need to do is sort that list in a descending order, and we want the highest charge to be first. And that's one of the reasons why we designed this particular list here. Is the first item in the list is charge amount. So when we sort this larger list, the first items are going to be the charge amount. So when we sort that large list, when we just say sort this list in descending order, it's going to be sorted by charge amount. Whereas if we wanted this list to be sorted by date, what we would have done is design this so that the service date is in the first position here. And then it would have been sorted by date. But we've been asked to sort this by charge amount. So that's why we designed that charge amount to be in the first list item. So we'll add a line of code to sort the list. So all you have to do is go under new, string manipulation, format, and the source is going to be what list that we want to format. And then we're going to go under the variables to choose our charge list. And we're going to say convert to series sort descending, because we want it to go from largest to smallest. Save at, and we're just going to save as, we're just going to save it right back on top of itself. Because all we're doing is taking the list, sorting it, and saving it right back on top of itself. We also need the lists. We need to get the list size. So we know we need the list size because let's say we had less than 10 charges print on this whole report, then we need to know if we're going to hit the end of our list, you know. So if there's only 8 charges they're printed on the whole report, we're not going to go. We want to know if we hit that 8, and we want to know if we hit the end of the list. So we want to get the list size. So I want to do string manipulation again, format, source, variable, we'll choose that list variable again, convert to series count. This is a function that will count how many items are in the list. and we're going to save that as list size. We need to initialize a couple of variables here, like we're going to set count to 0. We're going to set list position to 0 to begin our rule. So expression, compute expression, number 0. I'm going to save that as count. So set count to 0, and then we also need to set list position to 0. All right, and then we're ready to start our loop. We're going to start a do loop that's going to go traverse the list and look at the first 10 items, not just the first 10 items. If the first 10 items are not repeats, meaning that they don't have the same, these items don't have the same procedure code, we can stop there. But the first couple of items might be the same charge procedure code. So we want to not create duplicates on this top 10 list. So we still need to set up a separate counter. So the counter is going to count each item that we are including in this top 10 list. So we're going to keep looping until that reaches 10 or we reach the end of our list. So let's create a do loop here. So we're going to do while our variable count is less than 10, because this is a top 10 list. If we were asked to do, you know, top 50, then all we would have to do is change this to 50. But here we're going to say is less than 10. So we're going to keep going as long as the count is less than 10 and the list position is less than the list size. I'll explain that in a second. Accept that. So if we've reached the end of our list, the list position will equal the list size. So if we have a list that has 100 items in it, and then list position equals 100, then we've gone past the end of the list. Because list item number 99 is actually the last item in the list, because don't forget, we start counting at 0. So if we hit list item 100 for a 100 item list, there is no list item 100, and we've gone past the end of the list. So if you know that the list position equals the list size, then you've gone past the end of the list. You can stop your do loop. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the first item in the list next. So I'm going to add a statement here. I'm going to add an expression. And we're going to take the list, our whole charge list, and we're going to use an operator, the offset operator. And the cool thing about, the powerful thing about using the offset operator is that you can use a variable with it. So I can say offset variable list position. And then I'm going to save that as charge list, because that each item in this list is a list itself. So what we're going to do later on in the code is we're going to keep adding to list position. So we're going to keep iterating it, counting it. At the end of this do loop, we'll add 1 to it. So we start off at 0. We're going to get the 0th item in the list, and then we're going to add 1 to it for the next iteration of the do loop, and then we'll get the next item, which will be list position 1. So we're going to get, in this whole list, we're going to get, first we're going to get piece 0, and then we're going to get piece 1, piece 2, piece 3, all the way until we, we collect 10 items to print, or we reach the end of the list. All right, so next what we're going to do is we're going to take each piece of that charge list, each list member, each list item in that charge list, and save it off into separate variables. I'll show you that now. So if I take charge list operator offset 0, I know that that is the charge amount. So I'm going to save that under amount. And then I'm going to keep going for all 5 columns, all 5 list elements in that list. Compute expression, charge list operator. Oops, that was, let me back that up. Operator number 1 is going to be the date. We've already converted that date to an external format, so we don't have to worry about converting it here. And we're going to get piece 2 from our charge list. And that's going to be our procedure code. So save that as proc. Piece 3. And I'm glad this list is not too long. It's only 5 elements long. You know, this is one of the parts that is a little bit of a drag with Report Designer. You know, and if you're, you could do a lot of copying, pasting, and in MPR Report Writer, and but this is a lot of pointing and clicking. It's nice because someone without a lot of programming experience can build a report easily, but someone that is a programmer might find some parts of this a little tedious. So piece 3 is the account number. And then one more, the last one, piece 4 is the patient name. All right, so we saved, for this particular charge, we've saved them all the information in separate variables. Now we're going to create and maintain a whole separate list to keep track of which procedures are added to our print output now, because this way we can check to see which procedures we've already printed and not print a duplicate one. So what we're going to do now is let me see. We want to check to see if the procedure is in the list already. And you'll see where we build the list a little bit further on. But what we want to do is create a new statement here, and we want to do a search on the procedure code list. So what we're going to do here is do a string manipulation, and we're going to do a locate. This is how we do a search on a list. So we're going to choose a list that we want to search. And let's see, did I include the proc list here? Proc list size. There's a couple new variables that I forgot to create here. We're going to create them now. And that's called our procedure code list and our proc list size. You know, I also could just use, we already have a procedure code list in our external variable, eproc code list. We could just use that as well, but we're going to create a separate list here. So we're going to locate in our procedure code, our source is going to be our procedure code list here. And we're going to locate proc to see if this procedure that we're on now is already in the list. And then we're going to, let's see. Oh, one more variable. We have to, the search is going to return a value of where in the list we found the procedure code, if we found it. So I'm going to call that proc proc search. So if the search will return a value to this variable proc search. And I'll show you how we check that value next. What we also want to do is we have to get the size of the procedure code list. So we'll do that here as well. So we're going to use the source is going to be the procedure code list. And then we're going to do the function series count. And we're going to save the size of that list to proc list size. And it'll make more sense in a minute as to, you know, how we're using all of these values. So now is when we want to check to see if we've already processed this, if we've already printed this particular procedure code. So what we want to do is write an if statement that says, does the search result equal the size of the procedure list? So if we don't find a procedure code in the list already, the search result, the search would go all the way to the end of the list because it wouldn't find a procedure code and it would return the list size. So we're going to check for that. If we don't, if the search is equal to the list size, that means the procedure code is not in the list, and so we want to print it now. Or if the list hasn't been created yet, there's no list yet, then we also want to include this charge. So if the procedure code search is equal to the list size, we didn't find this procedure code in the list, so then it's safe to include it. As long as, and this is a little bit of a gotcha, you also always have to check to make sure there are items in the list. Because the first time we come into this loop and this code, the list is not going to be created yet because we haven't added anything to the list yet. So we always have to check for that too. So we're going to say or if there is no list size, the procedure list size does not exist. That means there's no list yet. If there's no list yet, we can continue on as well. So if this is true, then we want to include this charge on our top 10 list. So we're going to do that now. We're going to populate each of those 5 columns. So what we're going to do is we're going to join the first column, the first list, and the first column is our charge amount. We're going to join that to the charge column list. And then the next one, the next column is the service date list. So we're going to join the date to that list. Oops, go back a little. Join list. The next one is after service date is procedure code. So we're going to join proc to procedure code column. And then the account number. Account join to account number column. And then the last one is the name. And join the name to our name column. And here is where we're going to join the procedure to our procedure code list. Just to say, okay, we've included this procedure in our report output. What we're also going to do here is we're going to do the, let's see, did I do the count? Yeah, I did the count for the procedure list. All right, and then what we have to do is increment the counter for our top 10 counter here too. So we're going to add 1 to that counter. One plus count, and I'm going to save that as count just to increment that counter to keep track of when we've reached 10 items. And then we're going to end that if statement there because we've added an item to each of our 5 columns. And then what we want to do now after this if statement is we're going to increment our list position here so that, hey, we've done 1 item in the list. Now we're going to move on to the second item in our list. So I'm going to increment that counter now. Almost done with this rule. So 1 plus list position, save as list position. In common mistake, and I forget to do this a lot, I was playing around with this rule and I kind of wrote this rule before this educational session, is that I ran the report and the report just got stuck in like a spinning blue circle and would never end. And that's because I forgot to increment list position. So this do loop would continue on endlessly forever because the count is never getting incremented and it's always less than 10, so it just continues on forever. All right, and that is it. That's basically the rule there, and then all we have to do now is just add the fields, these list column fields to the report. We only have a few minutes left in the educational session, but we're almost there. I'm going to go and add those columns now to the trailer section of the report. So when I do a lookup under fields now, I'll go to external variables, And I'll select all of these except for the charge list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what I have to do for each of these is, well, we'll give it a label, account number, and then you have to tell the system that these are lists. So it's not free text, this is list, and we're going to tell it to list. There's a list orientation attribute. We have to say vertical. We want these lists to list out vertically. So this is going to be our charge lists, and then list alignment is list orientation is vertical. Patient name, list, patient name, all these external variables just have a length of 30, I mean a length of 20. So patient name I know is usually a little longer than that, so we're going to give it a little bit longer of a length. Almost there, and then procedure code. List orientation is vertical. And then our date, service date. Oops. That's going to list orientation is vertical. All right, now we just have to add those fields to the report, give this trailer region, give this trailer region a little more room, and we'll add those fields. And we're going to reorder them to the order we want them to print in. So we want the charge, the date, procedure code, and then the account number and the name. And then we just have to line these up in the trailer of the report. And then we'll hope this works first time through. Adding those fields automatically pushed a lot of these sections up. We'll fix that here. Oops, I just realized I added these to the wrong section. These have to be moved down. Into the report trailer. That's funny. Let me go to regions and back. Never seen that before. There's like a blank section here. There we go. That looks better. We'll just move these. column headers here and print the report. And normally I'd put a label here that describes what this section is, but we're about out of time here, so we'll skip that part. And we'll save this as final and run it, and hopefully we get our top 10 list here. Just in time. Charges with lists. Run it for that same 365 days. We'll go to the last page. Oh, this is it's there. It's just oh, something went wrong here. It didn't limit to it didn't limit it to the 10, and it's not like sorting correctly. But let me show you. So I did something incorrectly in there in that report, but let me show you the one that I put together right before this educational session. There is one that I called with lists, test charges, service date lists. But this is basically, you know, what it's supposed to do. At the end of the report, you see the highest charge first. There's 2 here, and there's going to be 8 on the last page, and there's not going to be any repeating procedure codes. But if we had more time, I would go in and we'd troubleshoot that report that I just did together. I must have just typed something in wrong. But that kind of shows you the power of lists and how you can manipulate and rearrange data and reprint it using lists. Let me get back to the presentation. And you know, that's pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Thanks for your time today, and continue to check out our website, the hcisolution.com/webinars, for future educational sessions that we'll be offering. And as Danae said, we will be posting recordings of these sessions up on our website soon. So Danae, I'm not sure if there's anything else that you wanted to add.
Sure, thanks, Dan. And if you have any reporting needs that need to be outsourced, we'd be happy to take that off your shoulders for you. We have an automated quote request form directly on our website where you can receive a no obligation quote within 24 hours. You can also contact us via email at sales@thehcisolution.com for more information or discuss a specific request. And again, thank you for coming and have a wonderful day.